My only point is saying this because I want to get back to why we're here. The press has not treated these incredible people who've done such a great job. They haven't treated them fairly. They're way off. We were way ahead of schedule. And remember this, because the Times story was a fake. But remember this, everything we did, I was criticized because I was too early. If I waited longer, it would have been, you would have been criticized. If I went way early, if I went 3 months earlier, I would have been criticized for being way too early. So with all of that being said, we understand it. I think I've educated a lot of people as to the press. And I would love to be able to say that we have a very honest press. Honestly, John, there'd be nothing I would be more proud of if the press would work. And I don't mind being criticized, but not when they're wrong. Not when people have done a great job.
The president decided to go on offense during the press conference for the task force, the coronavirus task force yesterday. And boy, oh boy, rarely would I tell you it might be worthwhile to go back and watch the actual back and forth. But the president's just had enough. He's had enough of the games, the childishness, the nonsense of the journos is something that the president has he no longer has any tolerance for it. He just doesn't want to hear it from them anymore. So here's what he did, and I was going to play it for you, but it's a really long, it's about 3 or 4 minutes long, and that's just too much for our radio purposes here. But he rolled out a video before the press conference. He rolled out a video where he had various journalists at the biggest networks coming out and saying that coronavirus was not going to be that big of a deal, shouldn't overreact to it. It's not going to be as bad as the flu, a lot of this. And then there was just a series of announcements from the president with the date at the bottom of the screen, starting with the travel ban. And then he gets into the emergency declaration. The various decisions that he made along the way based upon what the experts were saying and based upon what he was being told was necessary here. And so you have a president who is sick of allowing partisans to pretend that they're just bringing people facts and truth. He doesn't want to play that game anymore because they're not just bringing facts and truth. He knows that this is for them really a personal jihad. I mean, this is the effort of so many different journalists who feel like they've been snubbed and their role in the world is not what they thought it would be, and they don't have the access to the White House they would have had under Hillary Clinton. And he calls them out for their crap. He calls them on it, and they don't like that. And many of them view this moment of national crisis. Remember, it's a virus crisis and an economic crisis. So when I say crisis, it's really a moment of crises, two terrible things happening at the same time. And perhaps a third of unprecedented government overreach that, well, right now doesn't feel to some people like it's really that concerning. I think the precedent that has been set here is very concerning, but we'll hold off on that for a moment. The president decided he's had enough. He's had enough of the nonsense. He doesn't want to hear it anymore. And this stretches to a whole bunch of different issues. But, they played that video, and you have some CBS reporter, just another interchangeable, entitled, bratty hack, get into an exchange with the president that went something like this. Play 19.
The argument is that you bought yourself some time and you didn't use it to prepare hospitals. You didn't use it to ramp up testing. Right now,
you're so disgraceful. It's so disgraceful the way you say that. Let me just listen. I just went over it.
Or this rant supposed to make people
I just went over it
in an unprecedented crisis.
Nobody thought we should do it, and when I did it.
But what did you do with the time that you bought?
You know
the
we
month
did?
of February.
You know what we did? What do you do?
Month of February.
What do you do when you have no case in the whole United States?
You had cases
when
in February.
Excuse me, you reported it. 0 cases, 0 deaths on January 17th.
January. February, the entire
January.
month of
I said in
Your video
January.
has a complete gap.
On January 30th.
What did your administration do in February with the time that your travel ban bought
A
you?
lot.
What?
A lot. And in fact, we'll give you a list. What we did, in fact, part of it was up there. We did a lot. Look. You know you're a fake. you know that your whole network, the way you cover it, is fake. And most of you, and not all of you, but the people are wise to you. That's why you have a lower approval rating than you've ever had before, times probably 3.
This is a classic Trump moment. And I know people say, oh, he shouldn't be getting into the gutter with these journalists on this, and he's the president, and this is... No, I'm sorry. The old rules that we used to play by on the right involved, whether it was Bush or Romney, good heavens, or McCain, or any of these other would-be standard bearers of the Republican Party in office. The old rules were let the press just attack you, malign you, undermine you, destroy you, and you sit there and say, well, they're the fourth estate, and so I don't want to be viewed as in any way, going too hard on them right now. And no, I'm sorry. This CBS reporter is editorializing like she's an MSNBC nighttime host. She's editorializing against the president of the United States in the West Wing in a moment when we should be hearing useful information. How is it useful to have a debate with the president about whether he did enough or not in February? It's April. Why is that the focus? Oh, because that's for the CBS viewership and for the mainstream media. And if you want to get, DMs on Twitter from the big name blue check journos, if you want to get the attaboy or the attagirl from the rest of your fancy colleagues that are the people most celebrated at clown fests like the White House Correspondents' Dinner and crap like that. Oh, I guess they're not having that this year. What a shame. The people that want information and want honest, objective journalism don't get it from these morons. So why shouldn't the president dress them down in this way when they're being does anyone really think that wasn't disrespectful? Just imagine for a moment if anyone had ever interrupted, berated, and challenged Saint Obama when he was speaking from the podium as president of the United States on an issue of real national security importance, an issue of life and death. Do you think anybody would have ever said, oh, Saint Obama, what you're saying is a bunch of crap and you're lying? Well, I don't know why we're supposed to just take punches in the face on the right. Why Republicans have to accept getting drop kicked all the time, while and then some of our own side will say, no, we can't fight the way that they do. No, I'm sorry. There's too much at stake to think that we have to be a party of hall monitors who don't want to play rough and don't want to sneak out of class no matter how much fun the party is at the beach. Like, no, sorry. Enough is enough. And I think the president here is absolutely correct in slapping this nonsense down. Why allow this to go on? And if you think that wasn't enough nonsense, I've got more for you. Here's what a journalist, and Trump isn't the only one who feels the need to tell them what's what. Here is a journo, for example, who is asking a question of Dr. Fauci that this is not a good faith question. This is an assault on the administration disguised as an actual journalistic inquiry. All right, here's what was asked. Play clip 1.
Are you doing this voluntarily, or did the president?
No, I'm doing it. Everything I do is voluntarily. Please, don't even imply that.
You think Dr. Fauci should have to say that? This guy's got a lot of weighty decisions on his mind, a lot of conflicting evidence and theories. And I know we're not supposed to challenge the experts on anything, but the experts, I can't tell you how many doctors now I've talked to who have said, we really don't understand this virus very well. And we really are making decisions based on very crappy data. Big national level decisions with huge implications. We don't have the data to support them, but everyone's scared. Everyone's panicking. And nobody wants to be the one that says, stop panicking, because if you do that, now you want old people to die. This is what they tell you. And no one wants that to be said about them. Particularly moral and ethical people, that really stings for them when you think, wait a second, am I being a little bit callous in my calculation here? Am I being? No. I mean, we should be able to have a discussion about this in good faith, but that does not happen. It doesn't happen because there are people who operate from a place of dishonesty and bending others to their will and leveraging tragedy and difficult circumstances to that end. That's what's going on. That's what they're doing. Dr. Fauci is, why would she ask him if this is a voluntary thing? It's like, Dr. Fauci, are you making a hostage video here? I mean, do you even want to work for the Trump administration? This is the kind of stuff that he's being asked. And notice his response. He says, don't even imply that. He's like, what are you doing? What is wrong with you? Like a bunch of little idiot children. That's what journalists are. A bunch of little morons who don't know anything and don't understand anything and are babies. And what's amazing is that the journalists are always talking about how Trump is a baby. This is what psychologists call projection. Play clip 6.
You definitely saw the president backed into a corner yesterday, and you see what happens. I mean, he just starts talking about all of his power and acts like a little baby, to use his language.
Journalists act like babies. Yeah, the president's got a big ego, and he can be a little sensitive sometimes about things, but they've also been trying to ruin him and his family for the last 4 years, lie about him. The Russia collusion thing was a total scam, a top-to-bottom scam. Even more evidence now about that. You know, I haven't really talked to you about it on the show, but the FBI is like, yeah, the whole premise for Crossfire Hurricane was that Papadopoulos said something to a guy in a bar about maybe having the emails early. But they also had an informant, because they're running informants against the Trump campaign, as we know. They had an informant who heard from Papadopoulos, the same informant, I believe, but I might need to check on that part. Papadopoulos said, no, there's no way that we were involved in hacking emails or doing any of that stuff. That's crazy. That would be illegal. Oh, they said that sounded rehearsed. This just came out recently from the Inspector General because the notes, some of the classified footnotes from the IG report have been released now. Yeah, that's right. So when the source here, Papadopoulos, says something that's useful to the FBI investigation, known at the highest levels, of course, to try to target the Trump campaign, that is completely valid. And but when the same source talking about the same subject says something that undercuts the whole narrative, it, quote, sounds rehearsed to the agents. I mean, as if we're all so stupid. It was a scam. They abused their authority. They abused law enforcement discretion. They lied. They stacked the FISA warrants with garbage. The whole thing was a fraud. It was a soft coup attempt against the president of the United States. And they were trying to get his family ensnared in this. They wanted to remember when New York State and the Southern, not the Southern District, the district attorney for New York City was talking about maybe trying to find a way to bring state or city charges against the president or his family members so that then it couldn't be pardoned. I mean, they were really going after this guy. So, yeah, you know what? I'd be a little sensitive, too. I'd be a little sensitive about the journalists who are running around lying about me being a traitor, like the total idiots that they are, lying about how I cheated in the election, lying about how I'm a dictator, lying about how I, sexually assaulted women, all the things that they've been saying. I wonder if at some point a normal human being, not Trump, just an everyday guy, would have a nervous breakdown, and I don't just mean everyday guy. Another Republican put in this role, another elected official would probably collapse under all this. It's just crazy what they've done to him. And so now he's got the weight of this whole coronavirus fight on his shoulders. And instead of just getting information and asking, and look, there are relevant questions that are asked. I'm not saying there aren't journalists who do try to do a pretty decent job of getting information. Of course there are. But some of these journalists are just the worst. And I keep telling you this, it's true. Journalists are among the worst people in professional life in America. And journalism is a profession that has been tainted. It has been tainted beyond salvation by libs. The same way that the academy, the same way that colleges now, undergraduate institutions, liberal arts colleges, we're all starting to figure out, what do people really learn at these places? What are you learning at a liberal arts college that you wouldn't be able to learn if you just, look, you do need a level of education. You need to be able to get up to reading, writing, and math parity that you would have from a decent high school level education. I mean, you do need some instruction and study. I'm not telling everybody to just be an autodidact and try to learn on your own, but homeschooling can do it. Being self-taught can take you a long way. There's so much out there that isn't $55,000 a year of tuition to go to some third-tier school. You know what one of the problems is? Journalists, overwhelmingly third-tier students from third-tier colleges and universities who have a chip on their shoulder about it, and now they desperately want to be part of the cool club. Desperately. Oh, please, just give me a pat on the head from MSNBC. I just want to feel smart. Just tell me how smart I am. Tell me how I'm saving the republic by trashing Trump. They're the worst.
We were discussing today at the task force that when you look at the European Union as a whole, they have nearly 3 times the mortality rate that the United States of America has today. And that is a tribute to our extraordinary healthcare workers, their dedication, their tireless work. But it's also a tribute to the fact that the American people put into practice the mitigation efforts that the president counseled the nation to do on the advice of our best scientists now more than a month ago. And our hospitals were not overwhelmed and are not overwhelmed at this hour.
It's a very important, a series of very important points there. The hospitals are not overwhelmed. That was, we were told, that was really the big concern of a few weeks ago. That was why we were told you have to go into lockdown, have to bring down the curve. Now we're told really that bringing down the curve is more a function of just limiting to the greatest extent possible spread of this virus and the casualties from it, more so than specifically addressing the issue of hospital capacity. Well, that is a change, and it's one that we shouldn't just go past without it noting. And the other point that he makes here, I think, is so important for everyone to remember, that we have 1/3 the mortality rate of major European countries that are fighting against this virus. How many years now have we been told that European healthcare systems are better than ours, that they're more state-controlled and even socialist? I mean, Britain has a socialist healthcare system. They control, they pay the doctors, they control the medicine. It is a socialized sector of healthcare. How much, when you look at this now, when you see the numbers, it's quite clear that America's more free market, not free market, but more free market approach to healthcare will end up having saved many, many lives here. And I think that this will be an important, not just an important testament to how good our doctors, nurses, and EMS and frontline healthcare personnel across the board are, but also that having a robust and strong economy and having market incentives in the healthcare system saves lives. We all need to remember that one going forward. It's important because there are literally lives at stake. All right, team, for your listening enjoyment, we have the one and only Ann Coulter joining us now. She is the author of not 1, not 2, not 3, 13, in fact, New York Times bestsellers, of which I have actually read all of them, so that's always kind of fun. And thank you so much for joining us.
Great to talk to you, Buck Sexton. You're one of my favorite people on Twitter.
Thank you so much. These days, it's kind of lonely when you point things out on Twitter about how the so-called experts. I've just been asking the question, and not just on Twitter, but also of other doctors I know. What exactly do these people know who are making the calls? And behind closed doors, other brilliant doctors will in fact tell you they really don't know very much. What do you make of all this, Ed?
Yes, and this is obviously not a scientific sample, but I do have a lot of doctor friends, and they don't even know one another, both in LA and New York. And I've noticed that by and large, in fact, 100% of my doctor friends are think that the reaction is somewhat exaggerated. And all of my non-doctor friends are freaking out scaredy cats.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, which state are you in during this lockdown?
Mostly California. New York is unlivable.
Yeah, New York is where I am, and it's rough here right now. So at least California is doing better with this. But let me ask you about how Trump is handling this whole thing. You know, you've been somebody who early on, everyone knows, early on you said that Trump had something special. I'll never forget the Bill Maher the Bill Maher call that you made about how he was the most likely one to win. And now you've had criticism for Trump when he's messed up on things. How's he doing now on this?
That's a really good question. It was funny. Early yesterday, I was thinking to myself, I'm always making fun of these 3D chess people, but it looks like Trump is actually pulling it off here. He wants to open the country, doesn't want to get blamed for it. And right now, he's in a situation where the media is demanding that he open the country and saying he's dragging his feet. And this economic catastrophe is entirely on him. And, we'll have to turn to the governors. And I thought, genius. That's how we reopen the country. I mean, however it's done, I assume, bit by bit, some industries, until there's either a vaccine or enough testing to show that it's not as transmissible as believed, which is possible. That's among the crucial data we don't have yet. And then, man, this guy is easy to play. You could get Donald Trump to admit to participation in a crime by saying, no, you just drove the getaway car, right? Nope, I shot the 7-Eleven clerk. That was me. I mean, he did it with the Russia investigation. You will remember that. He goes through this whole procedure of getting Rod Rosenstein to write that letter saying we're getting rid of James Comey because we think he made a lot of mistakes in the Hillary investigation and announcing it was back on and then announcing it was off and this, that, and the other thing. So we request that the FBI director be fired. And then Donald Trump, everything's great, it's going fine. And then Donald Trump goes on Lester Holt and says, oh, no, that was my decision. I decided to do it anyway. Yeah, it was because of this Russia stuff.
He has an alpha to omega complex sometimes that comes out.
And that's exactly what happened at the press conference. I mean, there were many great moments at the press conference. I love the aggressive Trump. I would have put together a much better video, but it was okay. I liked him doing a video. I think he should do videos at all his press conferences. I love him being aggressive with these swine reporters who aren't reporters at all. They're like the liberals who show up at my college speeches, hectoring him. We're not getting any news out of this. They're trying to become stars. But yet and still, they know how to manipulate him. Say, well, you don't have the authority to reopen the country. And what does he do? I have total authority to reopen the country. And by the way, my complaint here is not that he said something that is not technically constitutionally true. I mean, I understood what he meant. He clarified it within the confines of the press conference he's talking about in the context of a viral pandemic like this. Of course he has all sorts of methods to decide whether the country is going to be reopened. Fine. If a state doesn't want to reopen, he can say, well, then you're not going to get any of this recovery money.
So I think
there are all sorts of things he can do. That's not what I'm complaining about. What I'm complaining about is he had just eased with no effort on his own. The media had moved the decision of when and how to reopen the country off of President Trump and on to the governors, and no, they manipulate him into grabbing it right back.
Well, this is my point is that they don't know. I think the press can't decide what the better situation is for bashing Trump, because on the one hand, they want him to be, they don't want to admit that he's had a big role in this, because what if, by the way, the reopening goes pretty well? Right. What if he pushes for a reopening and it's not as bad as people said, and now it looks like there'll be this big rise for him in the polls. But on the other hand, if they allow the governors to do this, well, if there's a catastrophe in one state or another, it was on the governor, right? So they don't know what they're rooting for. I think that's what you see in that press room.
They're going to bash him. You were 100% right, no matter what he does. They're hysterical. He doesn't shut down the country earlier, which is absurd, but then he does it, and they blame him for the results of the shutdown. Now they're saying reopen. He says, I have the authority to reopen. No, you don't have the authority. So it's true that whatever he does they are going to say it's his fault, he did the wrong thing, he's a monster, an authoritarian. True, true, true. All that is true. Yet and still, he was in the position yesterday morning of getting this off his plate. And it is, as you say, a Hobson's choice. Bad things are happening right now with the government shutdown. But whomever, whenever it gets reopened, every coronavirus death is going to be blamed on the politician who reopened the government. It doesn't matter how many lives were saved because we were allowed to go out and get fresh air and go to the beach, and businesses don't go under, and families aren't going, and family businesses and small businesses aren't going bankrupt. Those horrors and deaths will not count. Only the coronavirus death will count. So you don't want to be the politician in the position of being the one to make the decision. As of yesterday morning, through no effort on his own, the media had politely moved that off his plate, as you say, just to harangue him. So why did he take it back for himself? Now it's him again.
Yeah, I think it was a mistake. I think you got to I think letting the governors lead it and him backstopping, which is actually really, from a federalism perspective, I think what should kind of happen. But that's a whole other.
From a medical perspective.
Yeah, of course.
A lot of these states, the ones that are being browbeaten by CNN and MSNBC, who have not gone through the full stay home, don't get fresh air, don't exercise, stay home and transmit viruses to one another. They're actually doing quite well. Different states are different.
Yeah.
Rural communities are different from cities. Places with public transportation. I think public transportation. I'm not a doctor, but gosh, it sure seems noticeable. In addition to things like spring break and Mardi Gras, one major transmission vector appears to be things like subways.
Yes, and another thing that has been left out of this, and I don't know if you've had this experience yet, Ann, but I keep seeing things that are written, at least purportedly, by doctors, Medium posts, and other things that will pop up where doctors are theorizing or say anything that's against the consensus right now, which the consensus changes about this week to week. Masks being the best example. Like, masks were not necessary, then they were necessary, then we need. So it's interesting to see that consensus shuts people down. But I see things that get pulled off the internet, and two of the areas that I believe we're going to find out were really just overlooked in the panic to do the maximum here. You mentioned, transmission at home, intrafamilial transmission, particularly in New York. We're already seeing some of the data, and the governor has mentioned this, but he doesn't want to get into it. That's been terrible. But also nosocomial infection inside the hospitals. Telling everybody to show up to a hospital to get tested. This was a terrible idea.
Yes, and also to keep them in the hospital. I mean, much like a politician deciding whether to reopen, a doctor in an emergency room has to decide if somebody comes in showing, symptoms of Chinese virus, flu, pneumonia. What's he going to do? You're going to give him a hospital bed. You'd be mad not to give him a hospital bed. Whereas during normal times, they might say, okay, we're taking the test. We're sending you home with this oxygen breather and I don't know, Tamiflu, and we'll give you a call in a couple of days. Yeah, get them out of the hospital.
Yeah,
that would be the better thing to do. But can you imagine doing it now? What if the person goes home and dies?
Yeah, before COVID-19, and I've been saying this on my show just so people can really know that it's an important statistic. 80 to 100,000 people every year die from an infection that they got in the hospital. That's a lot of people. So, it's worth noting.
It's like the old, the John Lott point on guns. Liberals always say, people who own guns are more likely to be shot in their own neighborhoods. Well, I think that's why they have the gun.
Right.
Living in bad neighborhoods. It's like saying more people die in hospitals. Don't go to a hospital. You'll die there.
So guys, I want to come back with Ann and ask her some political questions because it turns out Barack Obama does have an endorsement to make. We'll get into that in just a second. All right, we're back with Ann Coulter, 13-time New York Times bestselling author, fierce on the Twitter, but actually quite delightful and entertaining in person. And thanks for staying with us.
Absolutely. Love to be here.
So Joe Biden is the nominee. This is a prediction that I have to admit to my audience I got wrong. I can't believe that he's actually the nominee in a sense. It just strikes me as it does seem like almost elder abuse. Obama's giving the last man standing in the candidate, in the race. Yeah, go for Joe Biden today. What do you make of this?
That was quite a ringing endorsement. Okay, fine, I'll endorse you.
But can he win? Can he beat him?
He waited even for Sanders to drop out. It's really not an overwhelming endorsement. Can he win? Well, I do think this coronavirus business, a lot of people think, oh, he looks so old and he has these stupid podcasts. No, this is the best thing that could happen to Joe Biden. I have said for a long time the Democrats could beat Trump if they could possibly run a candidate and not tell us who the candidate is. Just not Trump. You got two choices when you walk into the voting booth, Trump or not Trump. And I think a lot of people are just exhausted, whether it's Trump's fault or not. They're exhausted with having this constant chaos and frenzy and anger, and every night it's breaking. Oh, what did he do today? And I think people, not people like you and me, but people who are kind of on the fence are just going to think, okay, fine, where do I sign the contract? Just make all this chaos stop. So you have that, and also we're not really seeing what you, I think, accurately describe as the elder abuse of running this guy. The less you see of him, the better off the Democrats are. And then there's also the risk, if Trump, I know I'm getting to be a broken record on this, but if Trump had gone in and kept his promises on going tough against China, on bringing manufacturing home, on building the wall, and pretty much locking down the borders, oh, he'd be sitting pretty right now. But he didn't do that. He says that stuff, and he's tricked Democrats into opposing reasonable policies that 80% of the country agree with. I don't know if you saw this recent poll that 80% of Americans want a total immigration moratorium. That's only slightly up from what it was when he was elected and throughout his presidency. Why have we not gotten the immigration moratorium? I'm sorry, this virus came from China. And the media's response is, oh, don't call it the Chinese virus.
And we're not getting a wall either.
You're right, exactly. But I've gone from being, the one person I knew who thought Trump was going to win to saying, I don't know.
Yeah, no, it seems like also the Democrats, Orange Man bad / return to normalcy was that was the overriding narrative that you got. Trump is all the things they always say. He's so gross and evil and bad. But, for people that don't already feel that way, it seemed like that wasn't really going to move the needle. But return to normalcy, to your point, if normalcy means you can go back outside and live your life again, and if that just becomes the perception, then a return to normalcy pre-Trump, it used to be normalcy was a booming stock market, peace and prosperity in America. Doesn't feel like that right now. I think Democrats have something they're going to use.
Oh, absolutely. And this is not a statement of preference. It's terrifying that whomever the Democrat is, if the Democrat wins the presidential election, it'll be about the same. We think there's this huge difference. People who pay attention and watch the debate, huge difference between Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. They're going to hire the same people. You're going to get the same Supreme Court nominee. Poor Ruth Bader Ginsburg can finally retire. Any Democrat will absolutely fling open the borders, quite a bit more than Trump merely not keeping his promises on the border. So this is not said with any good cheer, but as I always say, I consider myself the president of the Re-elect Trump Committee by trying to get this guy to keep his promises, because that's the best way for him to get reelected. This coronavirus, though, I think is helping Biden. And however things shake out, people do have a tendency, again, not you or me, they have a tendency to blame the president when things aren't going well. And it's hard to see a lot of things bouncing back. I think we could open most of the country, but how are you going to open, one of my favorite things to do, professional baseball games? How are you going to open Disneyland? Movie theaters? Are people going to be comfortable flying?
The whole service industry is still that's
Yeah.
months and months and months off, and that employs 1/10 of Americans. So that's a big problem. But Ann, before we let you go and get into our next break here, one quarantine recommendation from Ann Coulter of what to watch. I would read obviously one of your books. What to watch? What are you watching these days?
Oh, I just thought of a good one that I should be recommending to people. What was it? Well, I loved Veep.
Okay. I haven't seen that one. We'll check that one out.
Really? That TV show?
I haven't seen it, yeah.
It's with Elaine from Seinfeld, and I think you'll really like it, but I think anybody would like it, because even though it's about a vice president, there's nothing political about it. It's just utterly cynical about politics. Quite accurate in that regard, in fact. And very funny.
Sounds fantastic. All right, everybody. Ann Coulter, if you haven't already, get one of her books, get a bunch of her books, and stay safe. Thanks so much for making the time for us.
Good to talk to you, Buck. Bye-bye.